Hey friends, Dave Porter here, and today we're going fretless. I've always loved the fretless bass going way back to when I first heard Jaco. Jaco Pastorius is the most iconic electric fretless bass player of all time, but there are tons of amazing great fretless players out there in all genres. Have you got a favorite? Let me know in the comments below. As long as I've been playing fretless bass, I've always used flat wound strings. I must have tried some round wounds at some point, but it's been so long ago I can't even remember why I switched back to flats. So that brings me to today's video. We're going to do a flat wound, round wound, and half wound bass string shootout. I'm going to choose a few iconic fretless bass songs and play through a section with each type of string, listening for any kind of tonal differences. I'll also give you my opinion on how rounds versus flats might be better for certain genres and how they might affect playability. Let's start by covering a little string theory 101. Like most players, you probably use round wound strings on your basses, especially if they're fretted. But did you know that flat wound strings were pretty much all bass players used until the early 60s when the late great John Entwistle of The Who approached Britain's Rotosound company about creating a set of round wound strings to complement his crazy bright piano-like bass playing style. Round wound strings have a steel core wrapped with a round wire made of stainless steel or nickel. Wrapping with a round wire gives them a brighter tone, but they also wear down frets and fretboards faster and they exaggerate finger noise. Flat wound strings have the same steel core, but, as you guess, they're wrapped in flat wire instead of round wire. This results in a smoother feel of the string and it's a much more mellow tone. Flats don't wear down the fretboard and frets as fast, and players generally don't change them as much because you really don't notice a degradation in tone as easily as the brighter round wound strings. Half wound or ground wound strings aren't as well known, but I wanted to include them in today's video because they're kind of a weird hybrid of rounds and flats. They have the same steel core wrapped in a round wire, but then they're pressed or ground so that the outer surface ends up flat like a flat wound string, but the inner surface wrapped to the wire is still a round, which results in a sort of a brighter tone, but it's less abrasive on frets and fingerboards than rounds. Let's listen to some demos of each string type, but before we get started, please hit the like and subscribe buttons. That way I can keep bringing you videos like this. Hey, got an idea for a topic that you want to see me do a video on? Please leave a comment below. I'd love to hear from you. Pop radio in the 80s and 90s had tons of hits featuring great fretless bass players. Giuseppe Pino Palladino started a fretless bass renaissance when he appeared on albums by Don Henley, Gary Newman, and 1985's Every Time You Go Away, written by Daryl Hall but performed by the great blues singer Paul Young. Pino is an extraordinarily gifted player who's played on thousands of recordings for the biggest names in music. Check out how beautifully his bass line serves the song and outlines the chords while occasionally stepping out for some blistering riffs. Pretty sure Pino was using flats on his signature fretless Stingray bass. Alright, we're back and we've got round wound strings on the bass now, and one thing that I did notice, even though they're the same gauge strings, it was a little bit more tension on the neck. I wasn't expecting that. I would think the tension would be the same, but the flat wounds had a little bit less tension. Round wounds, I had to give a little bit of relief to the neck. And if you're not familiar with setting up your bass, I'll post a link somewhere up around in here to one of my videos about setting up your bass. It explains everything about setting up your truss rod, adjusting the relief on the neck and everything, which is what I had to do. I had to relieve a little bit of tension on the neck because these strings had a little bit more tension on them. So let's go. Let's listen to it. Obviously, these are going to be a little bit brighter. And one thing that I've noticed, it's a little bit harder to to get a nice vibrato. I mean, you can get that one, but if you want to do that glissy type of glissando vibrato, a little bit harder because the strings have obviously the round texture to them, and I think it's obviously creating some resistance there. Have to press a little bit harder. Probably makes more of a man out of you playing the bass with round wounds, that's for sure. All right, so we're back and we've got half wounds on the bass now. Not familiar with these strings at all as far as how they feel until now, and you know, they really feel a whole lot like flat wounds. It's like flat wounds that have a little bit of a grit to them, you know, they've got some texture. I didn't notice a huge amount of change in the tension from these strings from the round wounds to the half wounds. I know I'm going to say that wrong at some point. To this hand, to my right hand, plucking, they feel an awful lot more like the flat wounds. And you know, you kind of get stuck to those. My fingers don't feel as dexterous. They sound more like flat wounds, really, rather than... They might have some brightness on the top end, but they've got lots of bottom end. As far as my left hand's concerned, and you know, there might be a break-in period, but it feels they have a texture to them, so they're not quite as easy to slide around on as the flat wounds. Those glissando kind of vibrato. Probably a little bit easier than they are with the round wounds. Harmonics are coming out nice. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe a little, probably about the same. Maybe the round wounds are a little bit better with the harmonics. I don't know. Let's listen to them in some songs.
I saw you go again when the leading man appears. Oh, it's the same thing. Can't you see we've got everything going on? Every time you go away, you take a piece of me with you. Every time you go away, you take a piece of me with you.
All right, next is a synth-inspired line on Peter Gabriel's Sledgehammer performed by legendary bassist Tony Levin. Tony used a fretless bass, but I'm not sure if he used flats or round wound strings, but I do know he used a Boss OC2 octave pedal, a little bit of light chorus, a pick, and a ton of compression. So here we go. All right, now here we are with Sledgehammer with the round wound strings. You know, one thing I am noticing a little bit is as far as finger plucking with the last song, my fingers like the round wound strings a whole lot more. It's the texture they're used to. And so when you're doing little accidentals or ghost notes, those tend to stick a little bit more for me. And maybe that's just the thing with flat wounds. With the round wounds, these fingers aren't sticking as much to the string. I feel like I have more dexterity. You know, that just feels, it's for what I'm used to. You know, maybe I'm just not used to flat wounds. But this song calls for a pick, so I'm going to probably be a whole lot brighter. I might back off the treble just a little bit. I'm trying not to mess with the controls here a whole lot so that we're kind of getting an even representation between all the different strings.
You could have sky back. All you do is call me. I'll be anything you need.
I'm going to stay in the 80s and finish up with Tony Franklin's explosive harmonic glissandos on the 1985 rock classic Radioactive by The Firm. While Jimmy Page and Paul Rodgers were the big stars of this rock supergroup, Tony Franklin was blazing new fretless bass trails on this album, and also with John Sykes of Whitesnake and a group called Blue Murder. Tony has his own signature set of round wound strings, so I assume that's what he was using on this recording.
Well, not tight, not unattractive. Turn me on tonight, 'cause I'm a radioactive. It's not a fight, and I'm not your captive. Turn me loose tonight, 'cause I'm a radioactive. I want to stay with you. I want to play with you, baby. I want to lay with you, and I want you to know. Got to concentrate. Don't be distracted. Turn me on tonight.
All right, round wounds on Radioactive. I gotta say, I think the harmonics are coming out a little bit better with round wounds, so maybe that's why Tony Franklin has his own signature set of GHS round wounds. You know, these harmonics are just popping out now. So,
well, not tight, not unattractive. Turn me on tonight, 'cause I'm a radioactive. It's not a fight, and I'm not your captive. Turn me loose tonight, 'cause I'm a radioactive. I want to stay with you. I want to play with you, baby. I want to lay with you, and I want you to know. Got to concentrate. Don't be distracted. Turn me on tonight, 'cause I'm a radioactive. Well, not tight, not unattractive. Turn me on tonight, 'cause I'm a radioactive. It's not a fight, and I'm not your captive. Turn me loose tonight, 'cause I'm a radioactive. I want to stay with you. I want to play with you, baby. I want to lay with you, and I want you to know. Got to concentrate. Don't be distracted. Turn me on tonight, 'cause I'm a radioactive.
all right, one final test for these strings is slapping. You probably don't slap much on a fretless bass unless you're Les Claypool, but we're going to try it out anyway on each string. So here we go. So let's hear how they slap a little bit. I'm going to put it back up a little bit closer to these two pickups just to give it some beef, a little bit of beef. You know what I'm talking about. definitely feel a lot more like a regular bass. And it's just what we're used to using. And slapping just sounds better with round wounds, for sure. So kind of like flat wounds, if you ask me, they're bassy. They don't have a whole lot of brightness to them as far as the upper end, that snap that you're looking for a slap. So, you know, probably go with the round wounds on the slap for sure. They definitely feel different. Definitely a lot bassier than the round wounds were. All right, so what are my final thoughts on these strings? I think if you're playing fingerstyle and you really want to have that nice moi sound that you get from fretless, half wounds or the flat wounds are the way to go. And you slide a lot easier too. If you're, I mean, you know, you shouldn't be sliding around to every note, but if it's the occasional slide in there, might sound a little bit better with flat wounds or with these half wounds. If you're playing rock and roll, or if you're doing any type of, you know, fusion type jazz, things like that, you know, thinking Jocko, Gary Willis, all that kind of stuff, or even what Tony Franklin was doing in rock with the harmonics and all that, I can definitely tell that the round wounds feel better, especially to my right hand, as far as not getting stuck to the string and things like that. So I may end up putting some round wounds on this thing and proceeding that way. Let me know in the comments if you played flat wounds before or round wounds. What do you prefer on your fretless bass? Maybe this will inspire you to try out some different strings and see what works best for you. I'll have links to all these strings. They're all Daddario. It is not a paid sponsorship or anything from Daddario, but they all happen to be Daddario strings. Daddario is the only people that I know of that make the half wound strings. There may be another manufacturer out there. I'm just not aware of them. So check them out. Check out the links to the strings. Get the right strings on your bass and get to rocking or jazzing or whatever you do. And hope you enjoyed this video. Please like and subscribe, and I'll see you soon. Take care.